In this lecture, we're going to go over a custom function that we're going to make that's going to really help us to determine the last available row on any particular sheet. Now, normally we have a line of code that we teach in some of my other courses, and I'm not going to break it down too awful much, but you'll definitely be able to copy and paste and tweak this code easily. But essentially, there's a way to get the very last available row using Excel VBA code, and you can do it on any particular column. I usually use column 1 or A, and if I would need to get the last column, I usually use row 1, assuming that there's nothing above the headers or actually on the very first row. Anyway, let's go ahead and show you how you can dynamically do that, and we're going to use the sheet name as our parameter. Remember, we just learned how to use parameters in our functions, so this is going to be really juicy and really dynamic and really helpful. So let's show you how to do that. Alt F11, we'll get back into here, into our Visual Basic Editor. Now really quick, I'm going to go ahead and create a new module. That's by clicking this drop down right here, and I'm going to click on module. Okay, module 2, you can rename it by double clicking on it and changing this name if you want. I'm going to leave it module 2 because we're just continuing on. We just don't want to pile up too many macros in there because it'll get a little bit messy. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create our first or our function regarding this. So we're going to say function space, and we're going to give it a name. In this case, I'm going to call this one D last row, which in my mind means dynamic last row. Okay, so open your parentheses, and the only parameter I'm going to use right now is going to be the sheet name. No, I don't want to say sheet or sheet name or something like that because that might be reserved. So I'm going to use something like C sheet, which in my mind stands for C character, or you could use str for a string of text, str sheet or something like this. So we're going to say C sheet is going to be our parameter, and that's going to be the sheet name, the name of the sheet. So if we go ahead and continue, here's what we're going to do. We're going to say that we want to get the last row, and let me just go ahead and demonstrate that in a regular procedure here, just on this sheet. So we're going to say my var, or you could use any variable name, but my var equals, and we're going to say this workbook dot sheets, and I'm going to give the name of the sheet, in this case the name of the sheet that I want to use, so that is called sheet 2, and we're going to use dot cells, and this is where it gets really confusing. Again, we teach how it works in another course, but I'm going to go ahead and show you how it works. So here's what we're doing. We're saying this is the sheet that we want to use. We're going to use the cells method, so that's row, comma, column. And in this case, we want to take the very last row using the rows.count, the very last row in column 1, which is column A. And we're going to use control up, or the end using XL up, and it takes the very bottommost cell in column A and hits control up, and it lands right here. But instead of taking the cell or the cell value, we just want the dot row. We want row 6 from whatever cell that it happened to land on. So that's the long and the short of it. It takes the dot row from that resultant cell that it landed on using the control up, which is XL up. Okay, so that's essentially it. So if we tested it with F8, we hit F8, we see that my var is in fact equal to 6. So we were able to obtain the last row, but let's make this dynamic using our newfound knowledge of dynamic functions and how we can put parameters in there. And we can even return a value. In this case, we want to return that number 6, but we want to use a function that's dynamic. This is going to be awesome. Are you ready? So here's what we're going to do. Let's go ahead and take the good part from that and paste it over here. And let's just take a look at that really quick. Now, if we click away, it might give you an error, might not. No, it's not going to. But we haven't completed our thought. Here's what we want to do. What we really want to do is we want to feed this function a sheet name. And for that sheet name, as a variable, not something in quotes like this is in quotes. We want to take that out and replace it with our variable with no quotes, so that whatever value is contained in that variable is going to end up right here in our formula. And then we're going to return the answer we're going to return, paste that here. So our answer to what is the last row in this particular sheet that we're asking it is going to appear in this variable here. And so let's go ahead and show you really quick. So I'm going to create another sub so that we can test the new function. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to say, we can use myvar again. Myvar equals, this time we're going to use the new function, d last row. And in this case, it's saying, hey, what sheet do you want to look for? Because we're dynamic now. So we're going to look for sheet 2. And that's all you have to do. Let's go ahead and test it out. We're going to test our new function within this sub. So I'm going to hit F8. And here we go, F8. So we're going to use d last row. And we're going to use that function on sheet 2. So if I hit F8, it's going to run through here. It's going to say, okay, you want a sheet 2. Roger that. We're going to put the sheet 2 right where it goes in the sheets section. Everything else is laid out automatically just fine. And we're going to return whatever that answer is over to this function. And we're going to end the function. And that's going to spit it out over here into your variable. So myvar equals 6. Aha, that's pretty cool, right? But now that we're dynamic, let's take a look at one of these other sheets here. So how about this one called left space right? That's the name of the sheet. So I'm going to copy that and hit escape. Alt F11. So now let's actually just copy this over here. So we'll make another line and we'll say myvar2 is going to be equal to this, but we're talking about the sheet called left space right. So now we'll be able to get 2 different last rows in column 1, in this case, dynamically, very easily. So let's go ahead and hit F8 and we'll see. In fact, we know what this one's going to do, right? We've seen it before, so we don't even have to hit F8 a bunch of times. Let's hit Shift F8, which means it's going to run the entire thing and then immediately return that value and move the yellow line to the next row on this sub. So if I hit Shift F8, which is essentially the same as clicking the step over buttons right here, it'll step over this, but it will complete the entire function that we're asking it to call. So let's hit Shift F8, and it just ran all those extra steps and returned the value 6. And this will do the same thing. If we hit Shift F8, it'll step over, but it'll still complete the action. So on this one, on this sheet, it says 2. Is that right? Yes. The last row is 2. And on the other sheet, we did already verify, but if we hit Control Up, yes, this is the row 6. So we see that our dynamic function is working really well. In the next lecture, we'll just tweak that barely. We'll add a couple extra parameters just to show you how you can add all these fun new parameters. We'll see you in just a second.